Let's take a look at a little bit of the coverage of the most recent gun violence in Texas with the mass shooting over at the mall in Allen, Texas. This I've taken from Nicole Wallace's program over on MSNBC. Nicole Wallace, of course, the Republican or one of the Republicans over on MSNBC. I'm not sure what her point is in being there. Is it to make the network look fair and balanced, or is it to make people think that Republicans can be reasonable when in fact, if they are voting for Republican candidates, they are in fact voting for the party who keeps weapons of war in the hands of just people who should not be having them, people who are Nazis, for example, like this latest one. Okay, so anyway, here's Nicole Wallace talking to Matt Dowd, and then McCaskill and another FBI guy come on after, but we're not going to talk about them. Here she is. And I'm going to break it down a little bit.
Some thread, but I've got to come to Matt Dowd first. This is, the lives of all the victims and anyone who witnessed what is increasingly described in graphic ways, horrific carnage of innocence gunned down at a shopping mall. Your thoughts today, Matt?
I just think that when discussing and using it's very desensitizing to talk in a reasonable tone of voice, in an unimpassioned or slightly impassioned tone of voice about the murder of fellow Americans because we refuse to change our laws. So I know Nicole is the host, but just keeping a monotone voice is in itself a brainwash.
It's just so incredibly anger provoking, I think is the best way to say it in this. We've had 8 mass shootings in Texas since Uvalde, not this year, not in the last 5 years, since the mass shooting in Uvalde.
There you go. This guy's showing some passion. Go for it.
And whether it's a school, a mall, a church, a Walmart, whatever it happens to be, it, as you enunciated, it's happening over and over and over again. And I'll give a couple of stats in this. And I think we have to get to anger, but we can't let anger push us to frustration and discouragement, because that's, I think, what the gun sort of lobby wants. They want us to.
I just want to tell you that we are already angry. How much anger do we have to have? We were angry at Newtown. We were outraged at that point.
Get to the point where we're so discouraged by this and this, we just give up and say that's who we are and that's the way it's going to be.
I think this guy makes a good point. Of course, the gun lobby would love us to just give up and, I guess, buy Kevlar and wear it at the mall.
It's got to take anger to a level where this becomes a huge part of any campaign in our political environment.
Wait a minute. We have to get as angry about the murder of our children as the right wing is. A drag queen story hour at a library. We got to get that mad about this.
Since Greg Abbott, the Republican governor of Texas, has got to be governor, mass shootings in Texas have risen 100%.
Drag queens at the library, they don't kill anybody. Can we get some of that rage over toward the actual issues that are actually killing people?
100% rise in mass shootings since Greg Abbott has been governor. And what has he done in that time? He's actually made it easier for people to get access to guns. Not made it harder. He's made it easier as that rise, 100% rise, has happened. And another thing I'll say is, what's amazing to me is when we constantly have this debate, and Greg Abbott is now saying, instead of saying deal with the guns, he's like, oh, it's a mental health issue. Not the least of which, Greg Abbott cut the mental health budget in Texas by hundreds of millions of dollars.
I mean, I hate to say this, but I'm kind of with Greg Abbott on this. Hear me out. It is a mental health issue. Everyone's mental health is suffering. I know how we can fix this mental health issue. We can take guns off the street, because having guns on the street makes people anxious. Anxiety is a mental health issue. It makes people fearful, paranoid, etc. You could get killed basically anywhere. It makes people terrified. It makes people clingy. It makes people have all manner of mental health reactions. And by the way, young people with mental health issues, if your parents are terrified every time they put you on the bus or let you go to the movies or the mall or the synagogue or the church or the grocery store, that anxiety is going to trickle down and it will contribute to the kids' anxiety. So anyway, yes, we have a mental health crisis and it is being fueled by having the guns on the street. So if you want to cure the mental health issues, start by taking the guns off the street. Start by creating what they call a holding environment where people can feel safe. Safety is a prerequisite for mental health. Greg Abbott, a rising star in the party of fascism. Ay, ay, ay. And this is why, again, because the NRA buys our politicians. Which senators have benefited the most from the NRA money? Well, you got your Mitt Romney. $13 million in NRA spending went to keep him voting against the best interests of his constituents. Richard Burr is number 2, which is interesting. You don't hear much from Richard Burr. He's hiding out in North Carolina, making sure everybody's got guns. Roy Blunt, Thom Tillis, Marco Rubio, Joni Ernst, Rob Portman, Todd Young, Bill Cassidy, Tom Cotton, Pat Toomey, Josh Hawley. And Josh Hawley is way up toward the top, and he is new in Congress, and he has already had $1 million, over $1 million, given by the NRA to him in his campaigns. Unbelievable. And as I scroll through here, you've got all the names. You got Chuck Grassley. You've got Ted Cruz, of course. I mean, I'm scrolling now. You've got Rand Paul, who's all for freedom. He's the libertarian. The people should have a right to guns. Unfortunately, your right to live in a safe society, you don't get that right. No. Mike Crapo, great last name for someone who takes money from the NRA. I believe these are almost all Republicans. Yes. And you've got Susan Collins, who always says the right thing, but always does the wrong one. I tried to Google how much money these people take from the lawn dart industry, but I couldn't find that information on the internets. So, if this has to do with the NRA, who is a mouthpiece for the arms industry and possibly Putin, if we're looking back and seeing, just how much money is being funneled into the NRA from Russia or Russian bankers or etc. You can look into that on your own. It's a rabbit hole. Very interesting rabbit hole. If the issue is politicians being bought off by the gun lobby, by the NRA, then the only solution, as I've said before and I will say again, is to either nationalize or making and selling arms into a nonprofit. How about a 501(c) for gun manufacturers that has to, follow bylaws and rules, etc.? How about that? And then all the profit, any profit that is made above the cost, and of course we will control salaries and it won't be publicly traded. Any profit made above that will go into projects like, I don't know, the wounded warriors or treatment for people with PTSD or payback for those families, not that you could ever pay them back, who have been affected by gun violence so that they can not have to worry about where their health insurance is coming from. Things like that. Anything. Education. Mental health services. It could be equine therapy. I don't care. As long as we make guns for profit and someone is profiting, this problem isn't going to get solved. You can take the AR-15s or whatever off the street, and yes, crazy nuts will come out shooting double-barrel pistols or whatever the hell. I don't know. I'm not a gun expert. I'm sure there will still be nuts trying to murder people, but maybe they wouldn't get so far as with a weapon of war. I do want to say I'm very sorry to everyone who has been touched more closely than just, by watching what's happening from this gun violence. The idea of thoughts and prayers has been stolen by the right as a meme and something horrible, but our hearts and love do go out. And that is the purpose of making this video. It's not a very popular sentiment, nationalizing the arms industry or non-profiting the arms industry. It's not a very popular sentiment. It's not something anyone ever talks about. But basically, yes, I'm all for upping the age, but that is rearranging one deck chair on the Titanic. But hey, if one deck chair is going to save some people, great. But let's not just stop there. We have to ban those ARs or just ban the bullets. And then we can keep moving and keep moving and keep moving. But I really think until we attack the economic motive for this, we're not getting anywhere. So who should we send this video to? Who would talk like this? Bernie? AOC? You tell me. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Put them in the comments. You're watching the Political Voices Network. I'm Julianna Forlano.
Republicans say they won't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But can honest, hard-working middle-class Americans really believe what these politicians say? Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Here's what Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett said during their Senate confirmation hearings.
Roe v. Wade. It is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. A good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade. It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court.
Roe is not a super precedent, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Well, we saw how that turned out. They played us for fools. Tell your elected officials to keep their hands off of our Social Security and health care benefits. Fool me once. Let Majority Rule was responsible for this message. LetMajorityRule.org is a project of the Marvin Lucas Super PAC, which is responsible for and paid for this ad and is not affiliated with or authorized by any political campaign or candidate or candidates committee.